Mary Holm, personal finance expert. I feel like it's been ages since you and I caught up.
Jesse, yes.
Yeah.
Well, you've been away when I haven't or whatever. Yeah, I was just going to say when I was driving in and I heard The Night They Drove Old Dixie Down,
Yeah.
I thought I must Google that song because it's clearly about the American Civil War, I assume, I think. But, and it's on the side of the Southerners, who of course were the ones that wanted to keep the slaves.
Yeah.
But Virgil Caine, was he a real man or something to research?
I wish you'd given me some notice. I could have answered all these questions.
Yeah.
Of course, the band's version is probably the most famous version from what was that big movie called The Last Waltz?
Yes.
That's Joan Baez. And my mum used to have that Joan Baez live album. We used to just thrash the heck out of it.
Wonderful.
The song I always remember is the Dylan song. She used to do the Jack of Hearts.
Oh, yes.
Do you know I'm interviewing Joan Baez next week?
Really?
Yeah.
On this show?
Yeah, I interviewed her this morning.
Fabulous.
Pre-recorded it and it plays out next week.
Oh, what
That's why
day
I've got
do you
Joan
know?
Baez on the mind.
Yeah.
Thank you for asking. Let me just a second. We're not live, are we? I don't have it yet. I'm sorry. But if you sign up to our newsletter, Mary, the RNZ website,
Oh, look, I didn't know you had one.
every Saturday or Friday, we send out a list of who we'll be talking to the following week. So,
Oh, I'll have to get that. Yes.
when are we going to play that Joan Baez interview? Yeah, I don't know. Sorry. Anyway, let's talk money.
Yes.
And you're talking about something called tax bracket creep today.
Yes, and I'm a bit afraid people are going to say, oh, God, this is about taxes, it's about numbers, I'm going to tune out. But it's not that hard to understand, I reckon, and it's quite important because it's the way that successive governments are actually sort of stealing money from all of us.
Yeah. I was looking at your notes on this and thinking, is Mary getting political this week? You're not really political, though. You stand for common sense and transparency.
I do, and I have to say that while I haven't been enamoured of everything the current government's done by any means, they have at least their their tax cuts are controversial because there's so many other things we could be doing with that money. But nonetheless, it is a first step in stopping bracket creep.
Yeah.
So I've got to congratulate them on that.
Okay.
So that's starting. The government tax cuts are taking effect from July the 31st, and so people should start seeing a little bit more money in their pay packets after that. I expect in the first pay packet it won't be your full cut because, if your pay period doesn't end on July the 31st, it'll be you'll get part of it the first paycheck and then more in the subsequent paychecks. But so what are we talking about here? Tax rates currently go like this. Up if you're earning less than 14,000, you pay 10.5% tax. And if you're earning between 14 and 48,000, then the portion of your pay between 14 and 48 pays tax at a higher rate. So you're the first
Every dollar over 14,000.
Yes, that's right. The first 14,000 for everybody, even someone who's bringing in $1 million, their first 14,000 is taxed at 10.5. I mean, there are some exceptions to that, but we won't go into that. That's the basic idea. And then the next, from 14 to 48,000, is taxed at 17.5, and then from 48 to 70,000, it's taxed at 30%. And then it goes up to 33. And finally, at the top, it goes to 39%. So you've got these cut-off points at which, and people get this wrong all the time, they think that if they're in, say, the 30% bracket, that they're paying 30% on all of their earnings, and that's not right. They're still paying only 10.5 on their first 14,000, and then etc. It goes like that. So, but New Zealand tax rates haven't changed since 2010 until now, which is a long time for for no change to be happening. There have been minor changes at the very top tax bracket. Well, they won't be minor for people who are hauling in $1 million, but they're not very relevant for most of us. The top tax bracket, if you earn more than $180,000, your tax is 39%, but that doesn't affect, as I say,
very staggered, isn't it?
People. Yes.
Unusually so, do you think?
Oh, look, back in, I think, under Muldoon, I'm not sure, the top tax bracket was over 60%. I mean, there have been periods where there were much bigger jumps in the tax rate. But when you have a look at this, so until now, there was no change from 2010 until 2024. And in that period, our average wages went up 64%. So a pretty big rise. And during that period, inflation went up 41%. So we've got wages going up 64 and inflation going up 41. So roughly speaking, about 2/3 of the wage rises that we got, all they did was keep us at pace with inflation, so that you could buy the same goods and services as you used to be able to. So about 2/3 of our pay rises were keeping in pace with inflation, but nonetheless we were being pushed up into higher and higher tax brackets as we got those pay rises. The brackets we were moving into were going up. So what it amounts to is the government's just getting more and more as your pay goes up. They're getting more and more of it because you're going into a higher tax bracket.
Yeah.
But for most of that increase you've got, it's only buying you more the same goods and services.
Yeah, fair enough. If you just get a pay rise and go into a higher tax bracket, that's what a higher tax bracket is for, to catch people like you as you get a higher income.
Yeah.
But if your real income isn't going up, if you're only keeping up with the cost of living and inflation, then actually you're being punished by a higher tax
you
bracket.
are.
Yeah.
And people are. So we're sort of losing spending power over the years. The New Zealand Initiative put out some numbers recently. They said from 2011 to 2023, the fact that there was no allowance for bracket creep meant that 1 million wage and salary earners moved from the bottom tax bracket into the next one up. So 1 million people moved up a tax bracket, and so they were paying higher taxes. And another 800,000 moved from the second tax bracket up to the third one. So there were a heck of a lot of New Zealanders who were getting pay rises that were moving them into a higher tax bracket. And that meant the government was taking more.
Yeah.
And they were better off because wage rises tend to be nearly always, certainly over longer periods, tend to be higher than inflation, but not that much higher, So it's not really fair to what's happened. Now the current government's moved in and changing things from July the 31st. So they're making anyone who's earning less than $14,000, so people on a part-time job, won't be affected by this, but everybody else with taxable income over $14,000 will get a tax cut. And that includes people who are earning interest and rent, not just people who are on wages. It might be retired people who are earning interest, etc. They will find that the tax on perhaps their bank term deposits is not quite as high as it was. And the way the government's doing that is it's still taxing at the same 10.5 and 17.5 and 30, etc. percent taxes, but it's raising the point at which you move from one bracket into the next one.
Yeah.
So instead of stopping at 14,000, they were, instead of changing tax at 14,000, it's now 15,600, and then instead of being 48,000, it's now 53,500, etc. By the way, I wish they'd rounded it to the nearest thousand. I don't think I think it just makes it harder for everybody. People struggle to get their heads around all this anyway.
Yeah, let alone a new tax bracket kicking in at $78,100.
Yes.
I wonder what the reason for that is, because...
Well, they're trying to adjust for inflation.
Right.
They've obviously done it to the nearest 100.
Yeah.
At least they haven't done it at $78,123.72.
Which they've sort of done with KiwiSaver. KiwiSaver, the annual contribution is a really odd number, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yes,
1,024.
1,042.
42.
Mind you, that one is built around $20 a week. You see, and if you multiply that by 52, you're getting to 1,040. And then the 2 is to allow for the fact that every year there's slightly more than 52 weeks in a year. So,
Mary, you didn't remind me to pay my $1,000 this year.
Hey, yes, I did.
No,
Don't tell me I did so. Well, I'll go back and find it.
Was it to me or was it someone else?
On this session, no.
Was it?
Yeah, it was.
Totally missed it this year. It's the first time I missed it for decades.
Now, you have got to do what I want you to do, which is set up automatic $20 a week or $87 a month, and then you won't even notice it.
Yeah.
And it'll just slip by and it'll all be taken care of. Okay. But
sorry for interrupting.
Yeah, now so we're getting back
now for people who have not yet guessed my link 3, I'm going to have to give you another clue. It's something to do with what the singers do outside of their singing. There you go. Thank you. 2101. 2101 to guess Joan Baez, Florence and the Machine, and Billy Corgan from the Smashing Pumpkins.
Sounds like a hard one. So, okay, so we've got, from 31st of July, the tax bracket cut-offs are increasing at each cut-off level. So that translates into people, so instead of being 14,000, it's 15,600. So that difference, that $1,600 difference will now be taxed at a lower rate rather than a higher rate for everybody coming through. So what I would really like to see, though, is an annual inflation adjustment so that it just happens every year, and so that people, if it's adjusted with inflation, it means that to the extent your pay has gone up more than inflation, you are paying more tax.
Yeah.
But to the extent it's only gone up as much as inflation or less, then you're paying no more tax, is what we really want to do. And lo and behold, they do it in America. They do it in 11 out of 27 European countries.
They automatically index tax brackets to inflation.
Yeah, every year. Germany does it every 2 years. And then there are some other countries that don't need to do it because they've got a flat tax. All their taxes, every dollar is taxed at 20% or 30% or whatever.
And you don't get bracket creep if there's no different brackets.
That's right. Yes. It's all just one big bracket. But, I would really like to see a government do that. The difficulty is, if it had always been done and it was just continuing to be done, no one would think anything of it. Currently, it's politically a bit difficult because the government is being criticised in some circles for raising taxes at a time when there are other things that some people think might better use the money for. So getting it back to an annual adjustment at first might be politically difficult, but I still think it's an honest thing to do. It's a fair thing to do. It's treating people fairly rather than just kind of the government sneakily getting more from you.
Yeah. They just don't have the appetite for it, hey?
Well, it would seem not. I mean, I haven't actually asked anyone directly, but, they might surprise us next year. I don't know that they've actually decided yet. They've decided to lower the taxes for this year. And maybe they will again next year, and maybe they'll announce that they're going to do it every year, which would be really good.
Yes, Jessie, Mary did remind you about the $1,000.
Thanks, whoever that was.
On text, yeah. Rory says, Jessie, wages beat inflation in the long term. I understand real spending power has dropped over decades, more or less constantly. Even doctors, I think, earn less in real terms than they did, although I'm happy to be wrong.
Yeah, no, I don't know how far back it goes, but the thing to do is have a look on the Reserve Bank website, which is rbnz.gov.nz. On there they've got something called an inflation calculator, and you can put in the period you want your calculations to start and finish. And then there's also wage inflation in there, and house price inflation, and food, I think, are the ones. I'll tell you what, for next time, I'll check that out. Certainly, I think in the last year, wages might have lagged behind inflation because inflation suddenly went up, and in the last year or two, but certainly in recent times. So as I was saying to you, since 2010, wages have gone up 64%. Inflation's been 41%, quite a big difference.
Yeah.
And that's from the Reserve Bank calculator. So they're the experts on this.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Jesse, could you please point out that the New Zealand Initiative is very anti-tax and is the new name for the Business Roundtable? Yeah, some people will know that. Doesn't mean that when they come up with an idea that makes sense, Mary can't.
Yeah, look, I certainly don't agree with everything the New Zealand Initiative says, by no means. But they've got some good data, and I'm sure their data's accurate.
Mary did tell you to pay your KiwiSaver. I heard you do it on this program.
Thanks, everybody.